The county clerk hung up on me mid-sentence, and that's when I knew the HOA had really done it this time. I stood there in my half-finished garage, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone while construction dust settled around my boots. 3 months of work, $40,000 invested, and now some bureaucrat was telling me my building permit had been administratively revoked pending investigation. Investigation of what? I'd followed every code, every regulation, dotted every I, and crossed every T. But none of that mattered when Patricia Hendricks and her Meadowbrook Estates HOA board decided they didn't like what I was building. My name is Kevin Irving, and I bought my house in Meadowbrook Estates just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 years ago. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first, tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, good schools nearby. The HOA seemed reasonable enough during the buying process. Standard stuff about lawn maintenance, paint colors, nothing that raised red flags. I should have known better. I've heard the horror stories, but like most people, I figured it wouldn't happen to me. The trouble started 6 months ago when I decided to build a detached garage with a workshop on my property. My lot is nearly half an acre, plenty of space, and the existing garage attached to my house barely fit 1 car. I'm a custom furniture maker, and I needed proper workspace. I drew up plans, hired an architect, and submitted everything to the county. The county approved it without issue, issued my permit in February, and I broke ground in March. Patricia showed up the day after my foundation was poured. She drove up in her white Lexus SUV, climbed out wearing tennis whites and oversized sunglasses, and marched straight through my open gate without so much as a hello. I was reviewing some lumber deliveries with my contractor, Mike Rodriguez, when she appeared. "Excuse me, but what exactly is this?" Patricia gestured broadly at the concrete foundation like it was a toxic waste dump. "Building a garage," I said, trying to keep my tone friendly. "Got all my permits from the county." "The county?" She removed her sunglasses, revealing perfectly made-up eyes narrowed in disapproval. "You didn't submit anything to the HOA Architectural Review Committee." That stopped me. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA covenant document I'd saved. Section 12, Paragraph 4. Detached structures under 1,000 square feet that meet county building codes are approved by default. No separate HOA approval required. Patricia's mouth tightened. That's a very liberal interpretation. "It's what the document says." I showed her the exact wording on my phone. She barely glanced at it. "The spirit of the covenant is clear. All construction requires architectural committee review. I'm the committee chair, and I never received your plans." "Because I wasn't required to submit them," I said, feeling my patience fray. "Look, Ms. Hendricks. Mrs. Hendricks. Mrs. Hendricks, I did everything by the book. If there's a problem with the covenant language, that's something the HOA needs to address, but it doesn't change what it currently says." She put her sunglasses back on. "We'll see about that." Then she turned and walked back to her Lexus, heels clicking on my driveway. Mike whistled low after she drove off. "Man, you just made an enemy." "She'll get over it," I said. I was wrong. The next week, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. It claimed my construction violated multiple covenants, demanded I cease work immediately, and threatened daily fines of $250. I read through it twice, increasingly angry. Every violation they cited was either completely fabricated or based on twisted interpretations of clear language. They claimed my garage was too industrial in appearance, even though the architectural plans showed it matching my house exactly. Same siding, same roof style, same color scheme. I called my own attorney, Richard Chen, who I'd used for my business incorporation. He reviewed everything and laughed. "This is garbage," Richard said over the phone. "They don't have a leg to stand on. The covenant is crystal clear. Want me to write them a response?" "Please." Richard sent a detailed letter explaining exactly why the HOA's position was legally baseless. I thought that would be the end of it. Construction continued. The framing went up, the roof went on, and the garage started looking like an actual building. My neighbors on both sides, the Johnsons and the Patels, both stopped by to compliment the work. Even people driving by occasionally paused to look. It was good work. Mike's crew was professional, and the building was clearly well made. Then, Patricia escalated. I got another certified letter, this time directly from the HOA board, not their attorney. They'd called an emergency meeting and passed a resolution declaring that Section 12, Paragraph 4 had been ambiguously worded and was hereby clarified to require architectural committee approval for all structures regardless of size. They were applying this clarification retroactively to my garage and demanding I either submit plans for approval or tear down what I'd built. I called Richard immediately. "Can they do this?" "Hell no," Richard said. "You can't retroactively change rules to punish someone who followed the existing rules. That's basic contract law. Plus, HOA covenants usually require homeowner votes for amendments, not just board resolutions." "So what do I do?" "Ignore them and keep building. If they want to take legal action, let them. They'll lose." I followed his advice. But Patricia wasn't done. She started showing up at my property unannounced, sometimes twice a week, always with a camera, taking pictures of everything. She'd walk around the construction site like an inspector, getting right up close to photograph details. Mike's crew found it creepy. So did I. "Sir, that lady's here again," one of Mike's guys, Tommy, called out one afternoon. I walked outside to find Patricia on a ladder, actually on a stepladder she'd brought with her, photographing the roof structure. "Mrs. Hendricks, you need to leave my property. I'm documenting code violations. You're trespassing. Get down and leave now." She climbed down with exaggerated slowness. "The HOA has a right to ensure covenant compliance. The HOA has no right to enter private property without permission. Next time I'm calling the police." "I'll save you the trouble," she said, "because you're going to have much bigger problems very soon." I didn't know what she meant until the following week, when I received a notice from Mecklenburg County Code Enforcement. They were opening an investigation into my building project based on multiple complaints about potential code violations. I needed to make my site available for inspection within 3 business days. I called the number on the notice and spoke with an inspector named Dave Martinez. "Mr. Irving, we received several detailed complaints suggesting your structure may not meet setback requirements, height restrictions, and various other code provisions." "I have a valid permit," I said. "Everything was approved." "I understand, but we have to investigate complaints. Can we schedule an inspection?" Dave came out 2 days later. He was professional and thorough, measuring everything, checking my plans against what was built, reviewing calculations. After 2 hours, he closed his notebook. "Mr. Irving, everything looks good. You're well within setbacks, height is compliant, construction quality is solid. I'll be closing this complaint as unfounded." "Thank you," I said, relieved. "Can I ask who filed the complaints?" "I can tell you it was multiple people from your HOA board. Same person coordinated them all, a Mrs. Patricia Hendricks. Between you and me, this looked like harassment from the start, but we have to investigate everything." After Dave left, I felt vindicated. The HOA had tried to use the county against me and failed. Construction continued. By early July, the exterior was essentially complete, and we were working on interior finishing, electrical, plumbing, the final details. Then I got the call from the county clerk that changed everything. "Mr. Irving, this is Sandra at the Mecklenburg County Building Permits Office. I'm calling to inform you that permit number B202604782 has been administratively revoked." My stomach dropped. "Revoked? Why?" "There are questions about whether the permit should have been issued in the first place. It's under review by the Board of Adjustments." "What questions?" "The inspector was just here last week and said everything was perfect." "I don't have those details, sir. You should receive formal notice in the mail within 3 business days." "Wait, I need to understand what's happening." That's when she hung up. I called Richard immediately, barely coherent with anger. He had me slow down and explain everything. Then he was silent for a long moment. "Kevin, this is serious. If they actually revoked your permit, you need to stop construction immediately." "But why would they revoke it?" "I don't know yet, but if you continue building without a valid permit, you're opening yourself up to major legal consequences. Stop work today, right now. Let me make some calls." I walked back out to the garage where Mike and his crew were installing drywall. "Guys, we need to stop." "What? Why?" Mike looked confused. "County revoked my permit." The crew exchanged glances. Mike pulled me aside. "Kevin, I've been doing this 20 years. Permits don't just get revoked, not when everything's been done right. Someone pulled strings." "Patricia," I said, "has to be. Question is, how'd she do it? Over the next 3 days, Richard worked his contacts at the county while I paced my house, going crazy with worry and frustration. The formal revocation notice arrived, a dense legal document that basically said my permit had been issued in error and that upon further review, my structure violated local ordinances. It didn't specify which ordinances. Richard finally called back. I found out what happened. Patricia Hendricks has been making a lot of noise at county commissioner meetings. Apparently her husband, Donald Hendricks, plays golf with 2 of the commissioners. She convinced them to have the permit review board take another look at your approval. Can they do that? It's murky. Technically, yes, they can review permits, but usually that only happens if there's clear evidence of mistake or fraud in the application. From what I can tell, someone on the board owed someone a favor. This is corruption. It's politics, small scale, local politics, but yes, essentially corruption. The good news is you have appeal rights. The bad news is the appeal process goes through the same county board that revoked your permit in the first place. So I'm screwed. Not necessarily. We can fight this, but it's going to be expensive and time-consuming. We're talking hearings, possible litigation, months of process. I sat down heavily. I can't believe this is happening, Richard sighed. Kevin, I'm going to be honest with you. I handle contract law and business stuff. This is turning into an administrative law nightmare with political complications. You need a specialist. Can you recommend someone? Yeah, let me send you some names. But Kevin, I'm talking serious money here. These attorneys bill $300+ per hour, and this could take a year to resolve. After hanging up, I walked through my house to the back window where I could see the garage. It stood there 90% complete, a beautiful building that matched my house perfectly. And now I couldn't touch it. I had already spent $40,000. The thought of spending tens of thousands more on attorneys with no guarantee of success made me sick. That evening, I was sitting on my back deck drinking a beer and staring at the garage when my neighbor Jim Johnson came over. Hey Kevin, heard about your permit trouble. That's rough. Patricia strikes again, I said. Jim grimaced. Yeah, I figured. Look, I'm probably not supposed to tell you this, but last month at the HOA meeting, Patricia was bragging about having connections at the county. Said she'd make sure your garage never got finished. Bragging about it? In front of everyone, some people looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. You know how it is. Nobody wants Patricia targeting them next. After Jim left, I sat there thinking. Patricia had used political connections to manipulate county government into revoking a legitimate permit. That was corrupt, unethical, and probably illegal. But how could I fight it? The county obviously wasn't going to police itself, and local attorneys had already told me it would be a nightmare. Then I remembered something my dad always said. When local government fails you, go higher. I spent the next morning researching North Carolina state government. I found the Department of Commerce, which oversees building codes. I found the Office of the State Auditor, which investigates local government issues. And I found the State Building Code Council, which has authority over local building departments. I called the State Building Code Council first, got transferred 3 times, and finally reached someone named Margaret Wu, who actually listened to my story. Mr. Irving, what you're describing sounds like a potential abuse of administrative authority. Do you have documentation? Everything. Emails, letters, my original permit, the revocation notice, inspection reports showing no violations. Send it all to me. I can't promise anything, but if local building officials are revoking valid permits for political reasons, that's a serious problem we need to examine. I spent the rest of the day compiling everything into a comprehensive package. Original architectural plans, my permit application and approval, the county inspection report giving everything a clean bill of health, the revocation notice, all the HOA letters, everything. I wrote a detailed timeline of events and included Jim's statement about Patricia's bragging, which he was willing to put in writing. I also filed complaints with the state auditor's office and sent a detailed letter to my state representative, Amanda Kowalski, whose district included my neighborhood. Then I waited. 2 weeks passed with no response from anyone at the state level. The HOA, meanwhile, sent another letter threatening to fine me for the incomplete, unpermitted structure on my property, apparently unaware of the irony that they were the reason the permit had been revoked in the first place. I was beginning to lose hope when my phone rang with a 919 area code, Raleigh, the state capital. Mr. Irving, this is Margaret Wu from the State Building Code Council. I've reviewed your materials, and I have to say, this is one of the more egregious cases I've seen. I'm recommending we open a formal investigation into Mecklenburg County's building permit procedures. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. What does that mean exactly? It means investigators from our office will examine how your permit was handled, interview relevant county officials, and determine if proper procedures were followed. If we find violations of State Building Code Administration requirements, we can mandate corrective action. How long does this take? Usually 4 to 6 weeks for the initial investigation. I should tell you, we've also been contacted by your state representative's office. Representative Kowalski is apparently very interested in this case. 2 days later, I got a call from Representative Kowalski's office asking me to come to her local constituent services office in Charlotte. I drove over that afternoon and met with her senior aide, Michael Torres. Mr. Irving, Representative Kowalski asked me to look into your situation. I've spoken with the State Building Code Council, and I've also done some digging into the Mecklenburg County Commissioners. I think you've stumbled onto something bigger than just your garage. What do you mean? Michael pulled out a folder. Patricia Hendricks has been very active in local politics. Her husband, Donald, runs a commercial development company. Over the past 2 years, they've been involved in at least 6 situations where HOA complaints led to county permit issues for homeowners. In 4 of those cases, the homeowners eventually sold their properties. And guess who bought them? No. Development companies associated with Donald Hendricks. They were buying properties below market value after making the owners' lives miserable. I felt cold. They're running a scheme. It appears that way, using HOA pressure and corrupt county officials to force property sales. Your case is different because you fought back and involved state authorities. Representative Kowalski thinks this warrants a broader investigation. What happens now? Keep cooperating with the State Building Code Council investigation. We're also referring this to the State Bureau of Investigation for potential criminal inquiry. What the Hendricks are doing, if we can prove it, could constitute fraud, extortion, and corruption of public officials. I left that meeting feeling like I'd opened Pandora's box. I just wanted to build a garage. Now, state investigators were looking into a criminal conspiracy. The next week, 2 investigators from the State Building Code Council showed up at the Mecklenburg County Building Department unannounced. I heard about it from Dave Martinez, the inspector who'd visited my site. "Kevin, it's a mess down here," Dave said on the phone. "These state investigators came in with subpoenas, started pulling all your files, asking questions about the permit revocation process. My boss is freaking out." "Did you talk to them?" "Yeah, I told them exactly what I told you. Your structure was completely compliant. The complaint was clearly harassment, and I had no idea why your permit got revoked. The investigators seemed very interested in who made the decision to revoke." The following day, I got another call from Margaret Wu. "Mr. Irving, I need to ask you some questions about county commissioner involvement in your permit revocation." "I don't have direct knowledge of commissioner involvement," I said, "but my attorney was told that Patricia Hendricks' husband knows some commissioners, and that's how she got them to review my permit. We've discovered that Commissioner Brad Watkins personally requested your permit be brought before the review board. He's also a member of the same country club as Donald Hendricks. We're trying to establish if there was any quid pro quo arrangement. Can you share what you found so far?" "Not in detail, but I can tell you that the process used to revoke your permit was highly irregular. The review board meeting where your permit was discussed wasn't properly noticed to the public, and there's no record of any actual code violations being identified. It appears your permit was revoked simply because a board member requested it, which is not how this is supposed to work." Over the next 2 weeks, the situation exploded. The Charlotte Observer ran a story. "State investigates county building permit practices after homeowner complaint." The article detailed my case and mentioned that state investigators were looking into potential corruption. Patricia Hendricks was quoted, saying the investigation was much ado about nothing and that she'd simply been advocating for neighborhood quality standards. The comment section online was wild. Dozens of other homeowners shared similar stories about the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, about Patricia's harassment, about suspicious pressure from county officials. The Observer ran a follow-up piece highlighting these accounts. Then Channel 9 News came to interview me. I stood in front of my unfinished garage and told my story on camera. The segment aired that evening, and my phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. Other homeowners who dealt with similar issues, reporters wanting more details, and several attorneys offering their services. But the most important call came from Margaret Wu. Mr. Irving, the State Building Code Council is issuing findings. Mecklenburg County violated state administrative procedures in revoking your permit. We're ordering them to reinstate it immediately. Really? Just like that? Just like that. You'll receive official notice tomorrow, and your permit will be active again. You can resume construction. I almost couldn't believe it. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much. Thank the system working the way it's supposed to, and thank yourself for not giving up. The official notice arrived the next day via email and certified mail. My permit was reinstated, and the county was ordered to process any future inspections in accordance with standard procedures without delay. I immediately called Mike Rodriguez. Mike, we're back on. Permits reinstated. No kidding? Man, that's great news. When do you want us back? As soon as possible. Mike's crew was back the following Monday. Word had spread through the neighborhood, and I had a steady stream of neighbors stopping by to congratulate me. Even people I'd never met before came over to shake my hand. Patricia Hendricks, notably, was nowhere to be seen. The garage was finished 2 weeks later. Final inspection was scheduled with Dave Martinez, who arrived right on time and went through everything methodically. Mr. Irving, everything looks excellent. You're approved for occupancy. He signed off on the final inspection and handed me the certificate. Congratulations. And just between us, I'm glad you fought this. What happened to you wasn't right. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you being straight with me through this whole thing. That weekend, I moved all my woodworking equipment into the new workshop. The space was perfect, plenty of room for my table saw, lathe, assembly benches, everything I needed. I spent Saturday just organizing tools and materials, enjoying the space I'd fought so hard for. Sunday afternoon, Jim Johnson came over with a six-pack. We sat in the workshop, and he looked around admiringly. This turned out great, Kevin. Worth the fight? I don't know yet. Ask me when all the dust settles. The dust was far from settled. The following week, the State Bureau of Investigation announced a formal criminal investigation into allegations of public corruption and fraud involving HOA activities in Mecklenburg County. The Observer reported that investigators were looking specifically at the Hendricks and their property acquisition pattern. Then things got really interesting. The county commissioners held an emergency meeting and voted to place Commissioner Brad Watkins on administrative leave pending the investigation. Watkins issued a statement denying any wrongdoing, but resigned 2 days later. Patricia Hendricks went silent on social media, where she'd previously been very active. The HOA board held a special meeting and voted to remove her as architectural committee chair. According to Jim, who attended the meeting, it was contentious. Patricia fought it hard, Jim said she'd done nothing wrong, that she was being persecuted for standing up for neighborhood standards. But too many people had stories about her harassment. The vote wasn't even close. A month after my permit was reinstated, federal agents showed up at the Hendricks' house. Apparently, the state investigation had uncovered enough evidence to interest the FBI's white-collar crime division. The investigation now included mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges. I watched from my workshop window as agents carried boxes out of Patricia's house. It was surreal. All I'd wanted was to build a garage, and now federal agents were investigating the HOA president. The criminal investigation took months to unfold. I cooperated fully, providing testimony about Patricia's harassment and the permit revocation. So did several other homeowners who dealt with similar problems. The investigators built a comprehensive case. In December, nearly 8 months after my permit had been reinstated, federal prosecutors announced indictments. Patricia Hendricks, Donald Hendricks, and former Commissioner Brad Watkins were all charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and corruption of public officials. The indictment alleged they'd orchestrated a scheme to pressure homeowners into selling properties below market value, generating profits of over $2 million. The criminal trial was scheduled for March 2027, but I didn't have to wait that long for resolution. In January, all three defendants accepted plea deals. Donald Hendricks pleaded guilty to fraud and conspiracy, receiving a 4-year prison sentence and being ordered to pay full restitution to all affected homeowners. Brad Watkins pleaded guilty to corruption charges and received 2 years in prison plus a permanent ban from holding public office. Patricia Hendricks fought longer, but eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy and extortion charges. She received a 3-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay restitution. Part of her plea agreement included providing detailed testimony about how the scheme worked, which would be used to reform HOA oversight in North Carolina. The day after the plea deals were announced, I was working in my shop when the doorbell rang. It was Jim Johnson and about a dozen other neighbors from Meadowbrook Estates. "Kevin, we wanted to thank you," Jim said. "If you hadn't fought back, if you'd just given up like the rest of us probably would have, Patricia would still be running the HOA and making everyone miserable." "I just wanted to build my garage," I said. "You did more than that. You exposed corruption that was hurting a lot of people. The HOA board asked me to tell you they're planning major reform, new bylaws, term limits for board members, independent oversight, real changes." We talked for a while about the neighborhood's plans moving forward. People seemed genuinely optimistic in a way they hadn't been before. The Hendricks' house went up for sale, the price reduced 3 times before finally selling at a significant loss. I heard they'd also lost their country club membership and most of their social circle. Consequences. Representative Kowalski stopped by one afternoon in February. She was in the neighborhood for a town hall and wanted to see the famous garage that had sparked a statewide investigation. "Mr. Irving, this is really nice work," she said, looking around the workshop. "And I wanted you to know, your case inspired legislation. We're introducing a bill to reform HOA oversight in North Carolina, including criminal penalties for board members who abuse their authority and stronger appeal processes for homeowners facing permit issues." "That's incredible," I said. "You made it possible by not giving up. Most people would have just torn down the garage and moved on." "I thought about it," I admitted, "but it wasn't right. They were wrong, and giving in would have just encouraged them to do it to someone else." The HOA reform legislation passed in April 2027 with bipartisan support. It created a state-level HOA ombudsman office to handle complaints, mandated transparency in HOA board operations, and established strict procedures for architectural review committees. It also made it a crime for HOA board members to use their position for personal financial gain or to harass homeowners. The law was nicknamed Kevin's Law in some news coverage, which was embarrassing but also satisfying in a way. Something good had come from the nightmare. My workshop became everything I'd hoped it would be. I expanded my custom furniture business, taking on bigger projects and higher-end clients. The publicity from the case had actually helped. Several people reached out specifically because they'd seen the news coverage and respected that I'd fought for what was right. 1 year after my permit was reinstated, I was working on a commissioned dining table when Patricia Hendricks walked into my workshop. I nearly dropped my orbital sander. She looked different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just jeans and a plain shirt. She'd aged a decade in a year. "I'm not supposed to be here," Patricia said quietly. "I'm out on bail pending my reporting date. I just wanted to say something before I go." "You should probably leave," I said. "Please, just 1 minute." I put down the sander and crossed my arms. 1 minute. "I'm sorry for everything I put you through. You were right. The garage was completely within the rules, and I had no business harassing you about it. I let my need for control and Donald's greed turn me into someone I hate. You fought back when everyone else had given up, and I respect that, even though it cost me everything." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to say her apology meant nothing after what she'd done. But she looked genuinely broken, and I'm not cruel. "You made choices, Patricia. You have to live with them. I hope prison gives you time to figure out who you want to be when you get out." She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you for that. And your garage really does look nice, matches the house perfectly. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of anger, pity, and closure. She'd tried to destroy me for no reason other than power and greed, and she'd paid a heavy price. I didn't feel good about her going to prison, but I didn't feel bad either. Justice was simply being served. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA transformed over the following year. The new board was younger, more reasonable, focused on actual community improvement rather than petty control. They organized neighborhood events, improved common areas, and worked with homeowners rather than against them. The difference was night and day. I even joined the Architectural Review Committee after being asked multiple times. I figured I could help prevent someone else from going through what I'd experienced. The committee now met regularly, published clear guidelines, and made decisions based on actual covenant language rather than personal preferences. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. 2 years after the whole ordeal began, I was at a neighborhood barbecue when a young couple approached me. They'd just bought a house 3 streets over. Mr. Irving, we wanted to introduce ourselves. We're the Mitchells, Jake and Lauren. We actually chose this neighborhood because of what you did. We read about how you stood up to the corrupt HOA and got the laws changed. It made us feel like this was a place where people looked out for each other. That's kind of you to say, I replied, though honestly, I was just trying to build a garage. Jake laughed. Maybe, but you ended up doing a lot more than that. My dad always said that evil succeeds when good people do nothing. You did something. After they walked away, Jim came over with fresh beers. You're a neighborhood legend now. Better get used to it. I just want to make furniture and live my life, Jim. Yeah, well, sometimes life has other plans, but hey, at least you got your garage. I looked back at my house, at the garage that had caused so much trouble and ultimately so much change. It was just a building, wood and nails and concrete. But it had become a symbol of something larger. The idea that ordinary people could fight back against corruption and win, that the system could work if you pushed it hard enough, that standing up for what's right mattered even when it was difficult and expensive and scary. Was it worth it? The stress, the money, the months of uncertainty. I thought about the Hendricks in prison, about Brad Watkins banned from public office, about new state laws protecting homeowners, about a neighborhood transformed from fear to community. I thought about all the people who'd thanked me, who'd shared their own stories of HOA abuse and expressed hope that things were changing. Yeah, it was worth it. My workshop became a gathering place. Other woodworkers from the area started stopping by to share techniques and see projects. I taught weekend classes on basic furniture making. The space that Patricia Hendricks had fought so hard to prevent became something that enriched not just my life, but the whole community. 3 years after everything happened, I was finishing a rocking chair commission when my phone rang. It was Margaret Wu from the State Building Code Council. Kevin, I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to let you know that the council's presenting you with a Citizen Service Award at our annual meeting next month. Your case led to significant improvements in how building permits are administered across North Carolina. That's very kind, but I don't need an award. I just wanted my garage, Margaret laughed. That's exactly why you're getting the award. You weren't looking for attention or recognition. You just wanted fairness. That's the best kind of civic engagement. Plus, Representative Kowalski will be there, and she specifically asked that you attend. I went to the ceremony in Raleigh, feeling awkward in a suit instead of my usual work clothes. The State Building Code Council chambers were surprisingly grand, with dark wood paneling and official seals everywhere. Margaret presented me with a plaque recognizing my unwavering commitment to proper building code administration and exposure of corrupt practices. Representative Kowalski spoke about how my case had sparked not just the HOA reform law, but also broader conversations about local government accountability. Kevin Irving represents the best of citizen engagement, she said. He didn't accept injustice, he didn't give up, and he trusted that the system could work if he pushed hard enough. Because of him, thousands of North Carolina homeowners have better protections and more confidence in their local government. After the ceremony, several people approached me to share their own HOA horror stories and thank me for making changes that helped them. One woman from Wilmington said my case had directly helped her fight her HOA's attempt to force her to remove solar panels. Another man from Asheville said his HOA had backed down from a dispute over his fence after his attorney cited the new laws passed in response to my case. Driving home that evening, I felt genuinely proud. I'd stood up for myself, refused to be bullied, and ended up making things better for lots of people I'd never meet. That was something. The woodworking business continued to grow. I hired an apprentice, a recent high school graduate named Marcus, who showed real talent and dedication. Teaching him was satisfying in ways I hadn't expected. I was building more than furniture now. I was building a future for someone else. The Meadowbrook Estates neighborhood thrived. Property values increased as word spread about the HOA reforms and community atmosphere. Several families specifically moved to the area because they had heard it was a place where residents looked out for each other. The annual neighborhood festival grew from a small cookout to a major event with food trucks, live music, and hundreds of attendees. I occasionally thought about Patricia Hendricks in prison, about whether she was actually reflecting on her choices or just bitter about getting caught. I hoped it was the former, but suspected the latter. Some people never learn. Donald Hendricks served his time and moved to Tennessee after his release, divorced and disgraced. Brad Watkins reportedly worked at a car dealership in Virginia, a dramatic fall from county commissioner. 4 years after the permit revocation, I was teaching a weekend woodworking class when one of my students asked about the garage story. I'd told it so many times by then that I had it down to an efficient narrative. HOA harassment, corrupt permit revocation, state investigation, criminal prosecution, happy ending. "But weren't you scared?" the student asked. "Taking on the whole system like that?" "Terrified," I admitted. There were nights I couldn't sleep, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake, if I should just tear down the garage and move on. But I kept thinking about my dad. He always said that doing the right thing isn't about whether it's easy or hard. It's about whether it's right. Fighting back was right. The student nodded thoughtfully. "I'm dealing with my HOA right now over a deck I want to build. They're being completely unreasonable. I was going to give up, but hearing your story makes me think I should fight." "If you're in the right, fight," I said. "Document everything, follow all the rules, and don't let them bully you. And if you need help, the state ombudsman office exists now because of cases like mine. Use it." He did fight, and he won. His HOA backed down once he cited the new laws and threatened to file a complaint with the state ombudsman. Another small victory made possible by the changes that came from my case. 5 years after everything started, I was working late in the shop when I got an email from an attorney representing several Meadowbrook Estates homeowners who'd been affected by the Hendricks' scheme. They'd been working on getting full restitution, including compensation for the stress and legal fees people had incurred. The email informed me I was entitled to $32,000 as compensation for my losses and emotional distress. I stared at the number. It didn't fully cover what I'd spent on legal fees and the project delays, but it was substantial. More importantly, it was acknowledgement that what had been done to me was wrong, and that there were consequences for that wrongdoing. The check arrived 3 weeks later. I deposited it and immediately donated $5,000 to a legal aid organization that helped homeowners fight HOA disputes. The rest went into my business account, funding for expansion plans I'd been considering. Marcus, my apprentice, had developed into a skilled craftsman. We took on increasingly complex projects, including a commission to build custom cabinets for a historic home renovation in Charlotte. The work was challenging and rewarding, exactly the kind of high-end projects I'd envisioned when I first planned the workshop. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said one day while we were installing the cabinets. "None of this would have happened if that HOA lady hadn't tried to stop you. You wouldn't have gotten famous. The business wouldn't have grown like this. I probably wouldn't have this apprenticeship. She tried to destroy you and ended up making everything better." He was right, though I'd never quite thought about it that way. Patricia's malicious interference had inadvertently created opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. The publicity from fighting back had raised my profile, attracted better clients, and opened doors. Unintended consequences cutting both ways. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA board asked me to serve as president after the previous president moved out of state. I declined. I was happy to serve on the architectural committee and help when needed, but I had no interest in running the HOA. I'd seen firsthand how that kind of power could corrupt even well-meaning people. Instead, a retired teacher named Sandra Wright took over as president. She was thoughtful, fair, and genuinely interested in building community rather than enforcing petty rules. Under her leadership, the HOA continued to evolve into something positive. The covenant was updated to remove ambiguous language and add clear protections for homeowners. The Architectural Committee published detailed guidelines so people knew exactly what was required for any project. Other HOAs around North Carolina started reaching out, asking for advice on reform based on what Meadowbrook Estates had done. I spoke at several neighborhood meetings, sharing my story and encouraging HOAs to prioritize community over control. Some listened, others didn't. You can't fix everything. 6 years after the garage construction began, I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to do a short film about my case as part of a series on civic engagement. I was hesitant, but the filmmaker, a woman named Rebecca Chen, was passionate about the project. "Your story illustrates how ordinary citizens can still make a difference," Rebecca said during our first meeting. "That's increasingly rare, and I think people need to hear it." The documentary took 3 months to film. Rebecca interviewed me, Jim Johnson, Margaret Wu, Representative Kowalski, Dave Martinez, even Richard Chen, my original attorney. She got footage of the neighborhood, my workshop, and the garage that had started everything. She even interviewed some of the other homeowners who'd been victims of the Hendricks scheme. The finished documentary, Building Justice: One Man's Fight Against HOA Corruption, premiered at a regional film festival and won an Audience Choice Award. It was later picked up by a streaming service and reached a surprisingly wide audience. My phone was busy again with interview requests and speaking invitations. I accepted some and declined others, trying to balance sharing the story with actually living my life. The attention was flattering, but also exhausting. I was a furniture maker who'd gotten tangled up in a fight I never wanted. Being treated like some kind of civic hero felt surreal, but the message resonated with people. I received hundreds of emails and messages from homeowners across the country dealing with similar issues. Some were fighting back, inspired by my example. Others just wanted to share their frustrations. I tried to respond to as many as possible, offering advice and encouragement. 7 years after everything started, I attended a state legislature session where they were debating additional HOA reforms. Representative Kowalski had invited me to testify. I spoke for 10 minutes about my experience and why strong oversight of HOA boards was essential. The bill passed unanimously. After the session, a young state representative approached me. "Mr. Irving, I grew up in an HOA neighborhood where the board was terrible. They made my parents miserable over the stupidest things. Hearing your story years ago inspired me to get into public service. I wanted to help fix problems like the ones you faced." That might have been the most satisfying moment of the whole experience. My fight hadn't just changed laws, it had inspired someone to dedicate their career to making things better. That was legacy beyond anything I could have imagined when I was just trying to build a garage. 8 years later, I was in my workshop, now twice the size after adding an addition the previous year, with proper approval from both the county and the friendly HOA Architectural Committee. Marcus had become a full partner in the business. We had 3 other employees and a 6-month waiting list for custom projects. A news alert popped up on my phone. Patricia Hendricks released from federal prison after serving full sentence. I read the brief article. She'd served 3 years, been released on supervised probation, and was reportedly moving to Florida to start over. I felt nothing. No satisfaction at her punishment, no sympathy for her situation, just complete indifference. She was a chapter in my life that had closed years ago. I hoped she'd learned something from her incarceration, but it wasn't my concern anymore. That evening, I sat on my back deck, looking at the garage that had caused so much trouble and ultimately so much good. The building was just as solid and functional as I'd envisioned 8 years earlier. The workshop inside had enabled a thriving business, provided employment for several people, and created beautiful furniture that would last for generations. Jim Johnson came over with beers, a regular evening ritual. We sat in comfortable silence for a while before he spoke. "You ever regret it? Fighting back instead of just tearing it down?" Not once, I said. Even when it was hardest, even when I thought I might lose everything, I never regretted standing up for what was right. You changed things, Kevin, not just for yourself, but for everyone dealing with corrupt HOAs. That matters. It did matter. The new laws had helped thousands of homeowners. The reforms at Meadowbrook Estates had inspired similar changes in other neighborhoods. The documentary had sparked conversations about local government accountability across the country. And I'd built a successful business in a workshop that almost never existed. All because I'd refused to be bullied, trusted that the system could work, and been willing to fight for justice even when it was difficult and expensive and uncertain. I just wanted to build a garage. But I'd ended up building something much more important, proof that ordinary people standing up for what's right can still win, that corruption can be defeated, and that persistence in the face of injustice matters. The garage stood solid and complete, a monument not to construction, but to determination. Every time I walked into my workshop, I was reminded that fighting back had been worth it. Every custom piece I created, every apprentice I trained, every neighbor who thanked me for making the community better, they were all dividends from that initial decision to not give up. Patricia Hendricks had tried to pressure the county into revoking my building permit. Too bad for her, I'd gotten the state involved. And in doing so, I'd changed everything.